Welcome to The Finder of Lost Things, exploring your superpowers of trust, healing and transformation with me, Hannah Belton. My brother, Christian, disappeared in Mali, Africa in 2003. He disappeared without a trace. We lost his story, we didn't have closure, we lost so much. I was fighting and searching to find Christian when actually I just needed to sit in stillness and attract him in. I was so resistant to doing this, but I had to surrender. It's a process of trusting and finding the lost pieces and integrating them. This podcast will uncover the process that Christian and I went on to find the lost things, him, and to find the parts of me that were missing.
And we were destined from the start to tell our story into the dark, for we were born to a great white shark.
Hello and welcome to the Finder of Lost Things. You join us today. Today is a seasonal holiday, Imbolc, which is on the 1st of February, and it marks in the northern hemisphere. It marks the midwinter point, and really the beginnings of spring, the first kind of shoots coming for spring. And I just wanted to mark that because, as you know, I do follow the seasons. I've talked about that before. And we're also still in this sort of cleansing time. And this week I had this theme come through of transformation. Now, I know the whole of this podcast is about, trust and healing and transformation, but today really feels very strongly about transformation. And there's a big element of, I don't know what's going to happen this week. I do have a guest who I'd like to introduce you to in a minute, Ursula, who you heard in the previous episode during my healing and her healing at the same time. But I'd just like to mark Imbolc by just drawing 3 cards to start with from an oracle card pack called, I don't know if that's the right way, Earth Magic. I choose 3 cards at every main seasonal holiday, and they give me an idea of what is going to happen in the next sort of 6 weeks till the next big holiday. And I've been doing this for about 18 months now, and it really does focus me on what's coming up and what I might be looking out for. And it's very comforting in a way. It's not telling the future, but it's just giving me a kind of like heads up about what the energy is about and what will be coming towards me. So I thought I might do this live. And so Imbolc is really a time of when the new seeds are coming in, and it's a time for planting new ideas. It's not a time for rushing around doing anything with those seeds necessarily, but it's because it's still a time of resting. We're still in winter, but it's very much a setting intentions and looking forwards, and also I'm sort of getting this feeling of being challenged. Things are still going to be challenging you at this time, and what strengths that you have within you that you can rely on to take you through the next couple. It is going to be the sort of next 6 weeks. So I'm just going to do a little shuffle here, and I'm going to pull out 3 cards and we'll see what we get. And it might inform tonight's episode. I suspect it will do, but let's just see. It's for everybody who's listening or watching, and just giving you an idea of how to use the energies at this time, because there is a lot of stirring of energy coming along. So let's see what we get. Okay. Winter solstice, we have reflection. Okay. So yeah, that ties in with the still being in the winter and still getting that clarity on things. We've talked a lot about, what are you missing? What have you lost? What do you want to find? But there still might not be that clarity, and it might be that you're taking your time with that question, and maybe you've been shying away from that question because it's a pretty big question. So it might be just a little bit more time for reflection, maybe a bit of journaling, maybe anything that's taken note of, anything that's like kind of jumps out at you during this episode, because I always ask at the beginning of every episode that I be given messages for the highest good of all. So just listen. If anything, if you get a chills or the hairs on your neck stand up or anything like that, you get some reaction, just reflect on what it was that came up and why that might be pertinent to you at this time. Okay, the next one. Oh, full moon completion. Now it might be, I know my guest Ursula, we have been through a kind of completion. We've been doing some grief healing sessions together, and I know that our sessions have come to an end, and there has been a sort of completion, which we will talk about in a minute. Full moon, it's the energy, it's a cleansing time again. It's what can you release, what can you let go of, and that includes relationships, that includes thoughts, it includes patterns of behavior, but what will then that allow space for? It's all about these new things that are rising up, and like being able to celebrate what you've actually achieved in the last, say, from the winter solstice, 21st of December. What have you actually achieved since then? Because I think we forget, to celebrate what we've actually been achieving. We're in lockdown. It's hard on everybody. Like it's we've got this far, so let's have a celebration about that. Maybe this evening, a sort of quiet contemplation about actually what have you achieved and what can you take forward. And the last one, that's a nice one. Forest. Breathe. Now I know, like Ursula and I have a lot to do with meadows and forests and trees and breathing, and that I guess that's a grounding thing as well, isn't it? It's a remembrance to go outside, to breathe in the fresh air, to, trees, the forest, they give us fresh air, don't they? The trees are the lungs of the world. So, and yeah, this thing with trees and meadows, this is certainly something which Christian and so I want to introduce you. So this is Ursula Dekker, and she's a soul healer, and she came I'll let her tell the story of how she came to me and how we met, but I do believe that her father, Edward, who I'll let Ursula tell you all about him, but I do believe that Edward and Christian kind of know each other in spirit, and they work together in some capacity, and we were brought together to do healing as part of a team. I still think we're going to be part of a team and how we move forward. And there's this big thing with grounding and with trees and building up from the roots upwards, having a strong trunk and a strong body, and then being able to open out and to blossom. And this whole thing with a transformation, we'll talk about it more as we go along, but there's things happening at the moment. So anyway, I'd like to introduce you to Ursula. Hopefully she'll appear on the screen. She probably already is there. Actually, I can't see her. Hi, Ursula.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
Thank you very much. So my name is Ursula Dekker, and as Hannah said, I'm a soul healer, but my journey really started at the point of loss when my father Edward passed away, and since then I had a foot in both realms in the least possible hippie way that could possibly be meant, but just literally living with a very acute awareness of both sides of the world and the universe, essentially. So he has been instrumental in guiding me to people to progress me, not just in my life, but in my journey and my soul purpose. And one of my best friends is a lady called Karen, and Karen has always been a pioneer in terms of finding and learning and discovering and meeting new people. And every single time she's gone for a session, Edward popped in and said, "Can you get my daughter to come see me, please?" And she's almost been the gatekeeper for my spiritual journey and the pivotal people that has been important in my life to guide me to where I'm now. And Hannah was no different. So she spoke about Hannah and Hannah's journey and what has happened with her and Christian. And the most important part of that for me was the fact that I couldn't dismiss Hannah as someone that came with book knowledge or with some glorious notion of the beauty of the tragedy. I needed someone that walked it and felt it and knew exactly what that texture was like, and that there was something on the other side that I couldn't yet see. I could reach, but I just couldn't yet feel that. And then I think lockdown for me was the time when I stood still, maybe for the first time, and was in a home, in an environment, in a place in my life, in my soul, where I could sit down and feel what needed to be felt. And then Hannah came into my life, and we started our work 2 months ago.
Yeah, it was interesting how I met Karen, and then just talking to Karen, then you sort of came to me to ask as well. But it was interesting because your father Edward, he died 18 years ago, and with it, and it's similar with Christian. It was that long that it took to be able to even acknowledge grief or face it. And I know when we first met, and we had our first session, and can you just explain to the audience the reaction that you got to me probing about Edward? And
meeting Hannah or having the first session with Hannah for me was very much I had a very strict closed off idea of what grief was like, what that felt like, what was going to be like. So my very first session was spent sitting cross-armed and staring at this woman, finding any possible means to dismiss her and hate her and be annoyed and irritated and angry, and trying to make her understand that I am this person. And yet I was sitting there being angry and stunted and unbelievably resistant to speak with her. And I think that was probably the only thing that had to come out of that first session, was realizing that all of the things that I have become since I've lost my father, all of the growth, all of the healing, all of the millions of beautiful things that life has brought into my life, I had none of those as a resource when it came to my father's grief. I was just a broken child. And I had these ideas. I had really set ideas about grief and loss and therapy and healing and what that was meant to be like and what Hannah was meant to be like. And then Hannah just talks, and then she talks some more, and then she just keeps talking. And then somehow through all of that, my father was able to talk again, because I was just so desperate to contact, to get in touch with him and for him to speak with me through Hannah, really. And it just affected the whole process in such a heavy way, just made it impossible for him and for me to actually move forward.
Yeah,
so,
it was interesting. It was interesting. If I can just pick up on that grief that I think you if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that feeling of not being able to kind of like feel that grief, it was something that you resisted feeling, or?
I have not grieved. What I experienced was absolutely paralyzing loss and nothing else, and a constant awareness of the lack of and the space next to me. Mm-hmm. I had no idea that grief was the process of losing, and that the one and the other don't necessarily happen together. They don't necessarily merge, because I haven't grieved. Mm-hmm. I've lost.
That was exactly the same with Christian. Yeah, you lose them, but how do you grieve? Yeah, exactly. And such a big loss that's, I know we've talked about this before, like the biggest loss that it could have possibly have been. And like, we're not taught, are we, how to cope with this loss and how to grieve and how to move through it. It's just,
and I was not brought up to feel and to show the feeling, and there was just a collective shock and there was a collective mourning all around me in this small town where I'm from, where this man was lost from everybody's lives, and he was a teacher, so he was in so many people's lives. And yet I was just me and my brother and my mother in our tiny little network of the remaining people of this family. There was just nothing. There was silence. There wasn't community. There was no grief. And I think that what was really, really shocking for me in this process that I've gone through with you, Hannah, is how little of me was present at the time when this happened. I just switched off in any and every possible way. And the person that I am is not that I brought none of those resources to losing him. I didn't bring any of those gifts and light and none of it. So, of course, my fear of going through grief was thinking I'm going to lose him and feel that loss, but I've already lost him. I couldn't re-lose my father, and yet I was in this weird, this entrapment of feeling that constant re-losing of him, as opposed to dealing with the grief and stopping that cycle, because it was just a recycled feeling of stuckness over and over the whole.
Yeah, because I remember you saying it's like just that sort of image of a cavern, just this emptiness. Like, and because when we say what did you lose, what part of you was missing as well?
The thing for me is that up until that point, I was a young adult, and so much of my life was invested in this relationship with my father, who is my primary parent. And the tree imagery here for me, so he for me is just this beautiful old oak. In every possible way. His roots were so deep, which means he could reach so high, and he was so stable, and yet he was a dreamer, and yet he was just the most beautiful person. He was the best father that anyone could have, and so I trusted him completely. At the detriment, really, of learning how to trust myself in the process, and then jumping into my life as me. And as we've uncovered in the sessions, that there was so much loss within that to really, truly find my feet, make mistakes and bring them back, and have him say, but it's okay. Just outsourced so much of my life yet, because I was on that verge of jumping into my future. And I had no concept that my father wouldn't be in my future. I had no idea. So when you sort of reset the time of loss for me, the before and the after, I only have an after, because before I didn't ever consider that he wouldn't be a part of any aspect of my life. He would just always be there, certain as sunrise.
Yeah. I mean,
and
we
then
should probably just explain.
After.
Yeah, so I was just saying we should probably explain to everybody that the circumstances surrounding your father's death and how much of a shock it was, and that you did, and part of the healing has actually been able to give him what you couldn't provide at the time, in terms of your sort of the farewell that you wanted to give him. So can we talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so I had a completely healthy working father. I was in university. He had some symptoms. He saw a doctor. They did a biopsy, and at that point they diagnosed him with bowel cancer. And he told me that he had bowel cancer and he was going to have surgery. My memory was completely hazy, and I really didn't know much of the time frame here. It was quite lost to me, really, when exactly things happened. So I had to actually retrace my steps. But essentially, he was diagnosed. He had an operation about a week or 14 days after the first symptoms, and the biopsy was done. And he recovered reasonably well after surgery, had complications, developed sepsis, and died because his heart of a heart attack. At which point, and this is so uncharacteristic, this is why I'm saying, the person that was there when all of this was happening in the hospital isn't me, because I asked no questions. I left him. I drove 2 hours away from my father at the point when he was critically ill and dying, and came back as he was already dead, and lost all of the things that I would have done now, the conversations about dying, about saying goodbye, about being close, about clipping his toenails and brushing his hair, a million small and big things, was lost because I wasn't there. I wasn't present. I don't know where I was. And when he essentially died, literally within, which felt like days for me, and was out of my life, and I was thrown back into university, having to finish a final year degree and be on that unbelievably fast trajectory of my young life without him. Mm-hmm. So what happened in the healing, which I think my father is eternally grateful, but I'm eternally grateful, is going back and redoing my father's funeral, because he was buried in a way that was, he died, I think, on the Tuesday morning, and he was buried on the Friday. So his body wasn't prepared. He wasn't buried in the way he would have wanted to. There was so much soul loss between the both of us at the time, and my father never voiced his wishes. There was so much denial across all of us in terms of having just close conversations at the time when something was happening right in front of our eyes. So I went back, and my father wanted to be buried almost on a shrine with all of his things, with flowers by the beach, and cremated literally, but with an open fire, surrounded by wood. And he loved fire, he loved wood. He was barbecuing incessantly, with his things and his people there and me there, and sending him into the world. It was very much about breath, wasn't it, Hannah? To breathe again, opening his chest and opening his wings, and for the world to take him back, and for him to go back into the world in a way. So it was really, really, really beautiful. And I understand now, I think, how important the ritual around death is, the things that needs to be done and said and felt, and in all aspects, to do it right and to feel it along the way at the time.
Yeah, I think this is so pertinent now, actually, isn't it? And my brother said about pertinent, I remember you going, oh, that's a funnier word, but in the previous episode, but it's so pertinent now with COVID, and people, they're not able to be at the hospitals, maybe they're not able to do the goodbyes and the rituals that we normally do, so which aren't great in my opinion anyway, but you know, we're really at a loss now. And actually I think this is probably, I'm getting, every time you mention about rituals and your dad, and it's like I can feel this build up of energy, like this is what we're here to do, is to help people through situations where the loss is so profound. And the other thing is that it's your loss, but it was your father's loss as well. So, and with Christian as well, there's to heal fully and truly, you do need the healing in both realms, don't you? It's a team effort.
And it's not just about me going forward into my life. It was very much about my father being able to say goodbye to his life, and the shock of how this happened for him as well. And you and I had this beautiful conversation about a nurse being there, having that conversation, saying, you are dying now, and holding his hand, something that simple. And my father said to me in spirit before 100 times that he never wanted to die in front of me. He wanted to always be my father and care for me in the way that he would always have done, and that this was his chosen way. But how he was buried, how his body was taken care of, how his funeral went, was not something that he would have chosen. And I did that with you in spirit and healing, and it was so powerful and so profound and so beautiful. And I wouldn't have thought that it would have been that way if you're not physically doing it. And then I said to you, I went to the beach, and I literally went to the beach last weekend, and I redid his funeral, and I did his speech for him, and he did a speech for me, and we spoke, and I did all the shells, and I did the physical aspects. But the session we did by the beach with him was that was the real one. And to be able to give him something when I was not yet an adult, I wasn't yet this person who has all the resources to be someone for him back. because up until that point, he was everything to me, and I wasn't yet there. I wasn't able to do all the millions of things back yet. And that funeral was he so needed me to do that for him. And I feel so grateful that I could do that for him. So grateful. What a beautiful thing to be able to gift him.
Absolutely.
In the way that he wanted. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know how grateful he was, and he still is, that was just exactly what he needed, and you could do that for him. So that was amazing.
And that's the thing that I will say to people is how you can do that. Anyone can do that. And it is as personable and as perfect and as just, we made it exactly what he needed it to be, and it felt perfect. So it's completely possible and completely necessary.
Absolutely. So for you, what has been the most sort of surprising thing about the whole healing process? Because I know when you first came to me, you kind of knew you had to do it for your sort of well-being, I guess, in the end. I mean, your soul was calling you to do this, and you kept getting prodded and prodded. Like I was exactly the same. And in the end you go, okay, I'm going to have to do this. But I know it has been a journey for you in terms of the trusting yourself and trusting the process and trusting me, I guess, to be part of it. But kind of what was the most surprising part of it for you?
I thought that I have grieved for my father for 18 years, whereas all I ever did was feel loss. Grieving is an active thing. Oh, yes. It requires telephone calls to relatives you do not want to talk to.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Conversations you do not want to be having. Digging up feelings that I myself didn't even want to feel, and then expecting them to dig it up for me in their, oh my Lord, active. It was, and it was easier than I thought it would be, because every single time I had to do something really difficult like that, my father just completely made it happen so beautifully, and he just guided it amazingly. And I'm not saying this because it's not all rainbows and bows and tied up all perfectly. It was profoundly difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was exactly what it needed to be. And grief takes work. Is all I would say. It takes work, and the soul retrieval for me. So for instance, I left home without the packing up of the bedroom and the packing up of the car and the sending the child into the world and saying, you go and find your wonder now. I'll be back home and I'll take care of everything for you. I didn't have that, and he didn't have that. But in my childhood home, I never said goodbye, and nor did my father. So we both had to do that. So it was surprising for me the things that I needed that I didn't even think of, and that he needed as well. And to go back and do that and realize that I have been floating between then and now. Even though I've had so much life, I've had so much experience, I've had so much love in my life, it has been floating. I haven't physically, cut the cord in a way in my life and move, sort of just be in the driver's seat of my own life, essentially, with my father staying behind, saying, I'm here. I sort of dragged this man into my future. We were just both sort of, crippling along. And that's not what he ever wanted. And he was trying to so beautifully and gently nudge me for years. But I just couldn't feel that loss. I felt like dealing with grief was going to be re-losing and feeling loss all the time, which it wasn't. It just isn't.
No, exactly. I mean, the thing is that grief, we have this, we were talking about this earlier, we have this image of, I keep getting this image of like a grief helmet that we put on when we're in grief or we've lost. And we really can't see, like, excuse the pun, like the wood for the trees. You really are very insular and you can't see past that. And you don't actually want to really feel the grief and look at the grief and work through it, because, oh my God, it is a hard slog, isn't it? It is a hard slog. And the things that you were asked to do as well, we'll talk about this a bit more if you don't mind later on, but like talking to your mother, talking to your brother, talking to friends, there was a lot that you were asked to do. And I was kind of saying to you, look, they're asking you to do this. And I was thinking, oh my goodness. But every week, Ursula, every week you did the work, and you were amazing. You didn't shy away from doing any of the work. But like you said, at the right time, things happen during the week, like with these episodes as well. It's like things come up at the right time during the week, and it was your time to face these things, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And there's only, with the soul work that I do, I understand how people and circumstances trigger us. I get that. I completely get it. But it's a very different story when it's happening in my own life, and I then have to take ownership of it and say, no, okay, this is happening. So what am I going to do about this? Am I going to be angry at a person who I feel is abandoning me, or I'm going to acknowledge the fact that I feel abandoned by my father and that I've never addressed that? And I've never felt it because it's so unbearably painful. Of course, I have used any possible means to my disposal to just not feel this for 18 years. And I was so good at it, I didn't even realize I didn't feel it. I thought I was feeling it, but I wasn't. So I'm humbled by the process. And I've got a lot more compassion for all the millions of different ways that people are trying to avoid feeling what they need to feel to go through this.
Yeah.
And I needed these 18 years to be in a place where I can just break down between the four walls of myself and my home, and that be okay.
Yeah, that's interesting about the divine timing of it, because I mean, our stories are very similar in that I just literally could not face my grief. I didn't know. I mean, Christian was missing, but again, like I didn't know how to do this at all.
Yeah.
And that feeling that, like, in the divine timing, it was the right time. I'd had my family, I'd had, work was fine. It was like, this is the time now for you to do this, and to really I kept being prodded. I mean, I don't know if there's people in the audience like thinking about, it's just like being prodded, but gently pushed to please do this for us all, and life. I mean, so how did grief, I mean, I know there were lots of tears and lots of release. Mm-hmm. How did that grief feel like when it was coming out? Was it, well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth at all, but what did that grief feel like when it was coming up and you were actually feeling it?
I was feeling helpless. Grief for me was helplessness. Mm-hmm. I think, and grief for me was like putting my whole life on pause and sitting in that suspended space in the darkness of it. And then when we started talking, and I couldn't form words, I couldn't even speak, I couldn't say the simplest things to you, I was crying so much. The first week was, I just cried. And I think because I'm so, I'm such a cognitive person, I use my mind so much, I just had to feel it, I just had to cry, knowing that it would eventually be okay. It wasn't the same as breaking down. It was completely different to that. It was crying because tears had to be, I had to feel it, and I had to just experience every single aspect of the utter helplessness that my life was thrown into when I lost the most important person in my life. So in the weeks that followed, I've said this to you before, this cavern, this hole in me became shallower and shallower. You would say something and I would think, oh, that's going to push me into a place. I'm going to get lost in that. And then I don't. And that was surprising, how there wasn't this unbelievable depth of despair within me anymore. And it's a physical change. It's not just an emotional thing. I could physically feel lighter, and what you would say would turn around quicker. Or I have this expectation that if somebody says something about my father, I'm going to be broken and lost for days, and I wasn't. So I had to also change my dialogue around, I am not broken, I am not lost, my father is not gone. This dialogue around I'm a grieving daughter has kept me very small for very long and very safe. And I didn't realize it was an excuse. I really didn't until I realized it. And then I just couldn't do anything other than face it and call you and make a plan.
Yeah, that's so interesting about, and there's this big thing about trust, isn't there? Like trusting the process and trusting yourself, you know, that from that childlike where you were kind of stuck and stagnant in that child Ursula, like to be able to do what you did for your father and actually move into that adult, you know, the strong and capable. I mean, you are strong and you are capable, but to have that as something, as a building massive foundation to move forward, that you know, trusting in yourself now.
Can I just say this to the listeners? If Hannah said to me, trust the process one more time in the first session, I might have killed her. I might have literally lost the will to live and do this work, because she was on the other side of this and I just wasn't there yet. I couldn't see it because Hannah, I didn't understand that grief, that there's things that you have to do. I didn't understand that. I just thought it's something you have to feel. You have to feel something and then you will not feel it anymore. But I had, as you know, had very little memory of so many things that happened. And I needed people to piece it together for me so that I could then feel what that felt like and the helplessness within that. And what I found really, really surprising was that I wasn't angry at my mum, for instance. I was angry at myself. And I sort of held that space for her for so many years in her inability to deal with this. But this is my inability to deal with this, is what it was really about.
Because your relationship with your relationship with everybody around you has changed as well, hasn't it? As a process of this grief healing. You were just saying about your mum as well, and your brother as well, because you were asked to speak to them about their side of the story as well, weren't you?
Yeah, and I have never asked anybody anything about this, and nor have I asked myself. Like, this goes both ways. Nor have I asked my father how he experienced this. I just didn't go there. So suddenly, after so many years, I had to ask very basic questions. When did you hear? How did you find out? What did you feel? Very basic questions that none of us ever asked. And how much that disabled all of us, how much that scattered us to the wind, how much isolation and loneliness was written into just not ever saying, are you okay today? It's so basic. And when I go back, because I couldn't remember anything, that's why I'm saying the person that I am now, this person would make the phone calls, will ask the questions, will sit around, will do the rituals, will bring in the light, will bring healing into the process. There was none of that. And I found that very, very interesting. One thing that you said to me that was amazing is when I spoke with my mum, and our relationship, by the way, isn't better. It's exactly the same. But you said to me, isn't that at least a constant? Because so much of the other things did change. That was a constant still. But a lot of my other relationships and friendships have changed, and some of them ended because that I've resonated from a wounded place for a very, very long time. And I connected to my friends from a wounded place. To me, that felt like depth and understanding and knowledge and knowing and compassion. And it felt like closeness. But it was just a wound. And it was just a resonance. And that feels like it's healing now. And I don't have to go there anymore to feel like someone understands me or gets me. Or me, them. It's both of those. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't feel like it anymore.
There's a lot of change, isn't there? So it's not just around the healing. It affects like every single relationship, really, and any relationship which wasn't quite. We always say about radiators and drains. Like if you just want to be with the people who give you the energy, who are the radiators, and actually it becomes pretty clear, doesn't it, that relationships that are maybe because you've changed, it's okay to let relationships go that no longer are being radiators for you. And I think it's a self a self-care part as well, isn't it? That you move forward and you're lighter and you just need the lightness around you. And I know with your dad, there was so much about healing the heart and opening the heart and letting it like breathe again. Wasn't there this sort of feeling
and
that
for the and leading from the heart safely. Yes, it's not complete. Let's talk about completeness. Yes, it's not perfect. Yes, it is unsure and uncertain. But I have kept my life so free from pain, any pain. But that meant I kept it free from possibility and taking chances and adventure, because I couldn't feel any sense of loss, not even disappointment, not any feeling of rejection, because it just fed straight back into this entire traumatic loss cycle. And now I get it. And I can look at it and think, I'm going to do it anyway, because I came through this. I'm completely on the other side of it. So I will take a chance. And disappointment, I'm not re-losing my father every time that I'm not getting something perfectly right. And being perfect was another massive thing for me, about being the perfect daughter for this perfect father, which is also, it's not true. It's an untruth that I've told myself to keep something going, to keep this whole, grief process going, and not really approach it with honesty and truth, and really get to the inside of it. Maybe.
Yeah, that was interesting, wasn't it? You really had to totally reassess your relationship with your father, and to see him as a flawed person as well, not just this father who could. I know he's the hero father, but you could see his flaws as well. You allowed yourself. That was part of the sort of seeing him from an adult point of view, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that's the way that a child looks at a situation, which is the way that I've looked at it. And I never reviewed it and never considered that those views were wrong. And I had to unveil a lot of untruths about my past that I never went back to revisit or reconsider, really, and didn't give it any thought, and just made up a story of my past and my father that just isn't true. And it meant that I had an expectation of myself as a person that, again, wasn't honest and wasn't real. Because if all the mistakes that I have made in my life was brought to the table and I brought them to my dad, he would have loved me anyway. He would have unconditionally been there for me anyway, because he was always. And it goes the other way around. And that for me was a massive loss. I've said this to you, huge loss to not be able to have had that with him. But I have it now because he sees everything. And he said to you, for instance, he never taught me how to let go, how to free the heart, how to open the wings. And so I don't know, it's just the relationship has matured and grown, I think.
Yeah, and we were talking, we had our last session just last week, and we were talking about the lightness of your father, and same with Christian as well, that they go from being a very physical presence to actually being like their essence. And you were saying about, I remember we were talking about the physicality is often the hardest or the last part to kind of let go of, and to know that they're still there. I mean, can you explain a little bit about the physicality and how light he feels now, and how light you feel as well, I guess?
I mean, initially my father was very present for me. I would feel chills and a sort of a coldness between my eyes, where he would kiss me between my eyes. There was a lot of physical presence for me. But within that, it meant my father wasn't able to really move on himself either, because he was very, very attached to me, still, and me attached to him. And I was just lost in that process, and I was just too grateful to have him in any variety that he was willing to come through to me. I was willing to have it. But in time, my father, I will see him physically now, but it's fleeting. It's much lighter. It's almost like just a thought that breezes through, as opposed to me clinging desperately onto any aspect of him, because it was just me clinging on to any feeling, any connection that we might have had. And now he feels like I see him almost on my periphery, like I said to you, I lived in my new house, and he was sitting on the porch in the sunshine looking at a book of birds, and he was on the periphery, and he was just there, and it was just simple and easy, and he didn't feel painful, and he didn't feel like an ache or a longing for him, because he was just present, and I didn't feel him physically in the way that I would have before. But today, when I drove home, and there was a song that came up, and then he just gave me that. He sometimes gives me this all over cold body shrill hug, and I felt that really strongly, and then he went again. So, but I'm not clinging onto it in a way that I did before, because I just needed to not keep losing him all over again, whereas I just haven't. He's a lot more present now. It's just a lot more subtle.
It's funny, isn't it? You think like going through a grieving process that you actually would lose them. And I think that's part of the reason why I didn't really want to do that, because I thought what I've got with Christian, I don't want to lose it. But actually, when you go through the grieving, you're healing both of you, and you become much closer. I mean, there's things, I mean, I know, you know, the same with Christian, you get to know more about them. You tell the truth about things, you know, you face things, and it does it. It's a completely, I mean, it's a joyous thing, I think.
Definitely. And I didn't want the loss of my father to be the mark in my life. I wanted the life of my father to be, you know, to be the part of my life. And his death was so traumatic and was so sudden and was so, you know, threw me completely off center. That I just thought all that was going to happen was I was going to re-lose him all over again. And I just, like I said before, I just didn't. It was that simple. I just didn't re-lose him. What I have feared had already happened. So the fear itself just kept me from bringing any light into it and coming out the other way.
So how did you, if we talk about the future now, I know it's early days for you in terms of getting used to the what is now you're going to become your normal. That's the sort of lightness, the feelings that you have now. It does take a while to get used to it. I remember that well. But how do you feel about the future now, and you know how you're going to be able to live your life now compared to maybe like a couple of months ago, how you were living and seeing the future?
So as I've said to you before, I feel like I'm just not there yet. My joy and my happy and my sort of contentness in my new normal hasn't caught up with me yet. No. Because I had this expectation of myself that somehow if I let go of all this grief, then like a balloon, I would just light up, you know, into the sky and off into the rainbows and into the sunshine. And it isn't like that. But it feels like I'm recalibrating. It feels like I've just found a new home, and I am allowing myself to feel every part of it, the insecurity, the loneliness without my father, the excitement and the creativity that comes with, you know, finding my place in the world. Essentially, after all these years, I've done this so many times. This is the first one. And I'm not treading cautiously. I'm stepping fully out into it. And some days it's hard and some days it's easy. And I'm just allowing myself to feel how I need to feel. And I keep talking about this house because it's such a manifestation for me about creating a new nest and a new place for me to go and live. And it's so unbelievably beautiful, and it's in such a phenomenal location, and it's going to be so healing to be there. It already is healing to be there, and inviting my father into that. But I'm not resonating from a wound anymore. I think that's the pivotal thing, that I'm not, at the center of me is not a hole or a place of just lack and loss.
Yeah,
there's possibility. Yeah, and that is new, and it feels a bit scary, but that scary is going to become just excitement and energy and fire and courage, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that feeling of suddenly being free. I mean, we had this session in last week in the podcast where I was like handed my freedom, and it's like, oh my God, what do I do with this freedom? I haven't lived like this for so long, and it's like, oh, it's a little bit frightening and a little bit unknown, but hey, let's grab it, because we've done all the grief, we've done all the loss and the cavernous emptiness. We don't need that anymore. It's we've become whole.
Life.
Let's live it.
Yeah, it's my life. I think that's I'm not in this tidal wave being pulled and pushed between wounds and reactions and recovery. It's just my life. However that looks, however that feels, however good or bad or happy or whatever the outcome is going to be, it will be mine, which is the only thing he has ever wanted from me, which is the only thing Christian's ever wanted for you.
Yeah, exactly. And we can be ourselves now. And I mean, how do you think this is going to, because obviously you're a soul healer, how and you're helping people all the time, so how do you think your experience now and the way you're feeling of being like a whole, how do you think that will work into the way you work and the way and maybe what the clients you're now going to be looking for, and how
so in the most possible unselfish way, I am not doing the healing because I need healing myself. I think that is the pivotal thing. And this is subconscious. This is not something that I've been aware of. But so often, I think people go into a healing or in a helping profession because they themselves need to be guided. So, we teach best what we need to learn most. That's sort of that principle. Absolutely. I firmly believe that. So I just think that my soul itself, I've honored my soul's journey, not just in my past lives going forward, but in my own life, in the most painful possible place, in, where my life was completely bruised and injured. I went there. So I think that the work that I'm going to do is not flowing around or through that anymore. It is just going, it feels like the path of my soul has cleared up. The energy is just stronger and it flows without constantly being disrupted by things that's going on in my own life. And I think when I'm doing the grief healing, I feel like I will attract people that need that type of healing work, but also that I now know that there's practical elements to dealing with grief. There's certain things you need in your life, structurally, in your foundation, in your actual everyday life, to feel safe enough to do this work, and to not just open a can of worms and then be completely left to the detriment of life, completely exposed and sitting with this, not knowing where to go. I understand that in a different way now, because you need to always come back safely from whatever work you do, from whatever place you are going to, and you need to come back safely and have a sense of home. So my father was my home before, and I'm now housing that space, and I'm building it physically around me at the moment. So I think my work is going to be lighter as well, because I'm not just attracting to that sadness within people, which before I thought was just empathy. I get it, so of course I feel it, but I felt it because I was still resonating from that space. Whereas it's like Margaret's gift last week to me was the pure heart, and it's like when you have the pure heart, you don't you don't produce a sort of washing machine effect for other people. Other people feel calm and they feel that you know what you're talking about, and you're in you're in control of your emotions, so it works well. And you said this wonderful phrase about the wounded healer, and I don't feel like I'm a wounded healer anymore. It feels healed. It is uncertain because it's new, but again it's belonging to me this time. I'm not constantly circling a drain of some abyss of sadness that was still within there. So so I think it's not just my work, but my life itself and my friendships and relationships have all had a bit of an upgrade, I think.
Brilliant. That's so good to hear. I mean, we're going to have to leave in a minute, but I mean, thank you so much for sharing your story, Ursula. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And what a brilliant story in terms of the theme of transformation. From where you were like 2 months ago, it really is incredible. So thank you so much for sharing. And I hope you'll be a friend of the show and come back another time and talk to us about your soul healing, because it's fascinating. And having experienced it last week, yeah, it's absolutely a beautiful experience. So I wish you best of luck with your house move and your garden and your father there as the oak tree and watching the birds. And I'm sure Christian and Edward will continue their whatever they do up there.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for being, I don't know, for being one of us. I think there's a few of us in the world that do this, that walk this walk, and I'm so grateful that you were brought into my life, and I'm so grateful that your brother and my father still work together. What a beautiful union they've got.
Absolutely. Actually, it would be really lovely if like listeners out there, if they also do in a grief healing capacity, it would be lovely to meet more people, wouldn't it? To maybe form a community around here that we could grow this and really create something big around a grief ritual that really, really does work and really does heal and completely transforms lives. That would be amazing.
Yeah, and you and I was talking about changing not just the dialogue, but the physicality of grief into something that becomes a fire, that becomes passionate, that becomes creative, that doesn't just suck the life out of, because the loss is enough. The loss sucked the life out.
Yeah, let's bring the life back.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, well, lovely. Thank you so much, Ursula. And
thank you, Hannah.
I am so sorry that went so quickly. We had no time for breaks at all. So I hope everyone got something from this episode. And remember your reflection, your completion, and your breath moving forward for the next few weeks. Okay, next week, I'm not really sure what's on next week as usual, but I hope you enjoyed today, and I'll talk to you next Monday. Okay, lots of love, everybody. Thank you for listening to The Finder of Lost Things. I think we've been triggered so long and so hard by COVID, and it's going to carry on. People are getting used to stillness, and they're getting used to more solitude, but how do you use that time for the highest good? This process that we're going to explore will bring back the joy and purpose to life. That wholeness, that sort of harmony and flow and togetherness. People are really ready to find their lost parts now. You can find me at hannahvelton.online.
Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its management, or advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.